but let's get started on
Let's do it.
MTHFR and thyroid. So let's go to our first slide. We just have a handful of slides. Our goal is 30 minutes. And again, to discuss why it's so important if you have MTHFR to understand thyroid, thyroid health, thyroid function, and why having an MTHFR genetic mutation can affect thyroid function. So come on, let's get started. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
We get there. It just takes a couple minutes. All right, the introduction slide. So I'm Amy Jaramillo. I'm the scientific director here at Body Science down in Miami. We've never put a picture of our building before, and then we decided today, let's do that. We are a functional medical clinic, functional medicine, and we specialize in MTHFR and other genetics that lead to toxification and the diseases that result. So I don't think we've mentioned this, but we have a large clinic here for ALS, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis. So the reason I mentioned that is our goal is actually to find people when they're early in toxic burden and try and reverse it. And we see MTHFR in a disproportionately high number of folks because, unlike yourselves, they had the gene, they didn't know it, they kept becoming toxic. So, okay, let me let you introduce yourself. Go
It's
for
fine.
it.
I'm Kyle. If you haven't seen me in the last webinars, I'm the nursing manager. I've joined Amy. My own life has changed. That's why I'm here. I love doing what I'm doing with her and the whole team here. I worked ER for about 11 years as a paramedic and a nurse. And this is just a whole different side of medicine that I didn't know existed. It's just the way it integrates with science and functional. It's amazing. So thanks for having me.
I love it. Kind of been working together now for a little over a year.
Yeah.
All right, guys. So our first slide, we show you the title of today. And again, we're talking MTHFR and thyroid. If you have been tuning in, this is number 3.
Number 3.
No,
4.
This is 4.
4.
Okay. So our first was, the basics of MTHFR. And our second was really kind of getting an understanding of what does that mean. And then our last was discussing gut-related implications. And today, thyroid, so understand what we did initially was a basic education of detoxification errors and why building up toxins can lead to problems. And then we switched gears, so starting with gut and now with thyroid, to look at areas of the body that are very susceptible to toxic buildup, areas of the body that typically function poorly. When you've reached a specific toxic threshold, the cells develop such a degree of inefficiency, they just can't perform. And in addition, oftentimes the immune system gets confused, right? Again, there's all this debris in the blood, and there's all this scattered inflammation everywhere. And so a host of dysregulations are commonly the next step. So the couple things, right? So thing number 1, lots of you folks that have MTHFR, us included, are more susceptible to thyroid dysregulation. Okay. Thing number 2, which is probably more important, your genetics are not your destiny. They're just not. The fact that you have MTHFR, whether you have a single copy of a mutation or 2 copies, now that you know what's going on, and like for me, for you now, we call this thing the superpower, right? You know that you're a poor detoxifier because you can't tolerate toxins, they make you sick. It's the flag that your body waves to say, something's going on, help remove this so that I don't get sick. And so if you don't, then systems start to break. And so thyroid as a gland fits into the category of tissues in the body that absorb toxins at one of the fastest speeds, meaning glands in a human body absorb toxins very quickly and hold toxins oftentimes in a higher concentration than other areas of the body. And that is why toxins can commonly dysregulate the thyroid, in women, ovaries, in men, testes, and lead to testicular failure or men with low testosterone at younger ages. And oftentimes you can see a pancreas that suffers and becomes dysregulated as well. And the hormones from all of those glands, so whether we're talking about thyroid hormone, whether we're talking about estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, whether we're talking about insulin, right? Those areas, those hormones oftentimes suffer with a number of dysregulations as toxins build up and damage key glands.
Yeah. And those glands are the ones that control, just to put it more in more simple terms, it would be those functions. So it would control insulin, pancreatic, renal, you'll have hypertension, or just blood pressure dysregulations, And so whenever you have any kind of toxic exposures that create these metabolic imbalances, that's where you're going to see, and up to including sleep, just the way insulin resistance, and just a whole host of other things.
Remember, that was the simpler version. So I said what I thought was not confusing, and then Kyle translated that into what he said was simpler. That was even more complicated. That was like so complicated. Okay, that was super complicated. But you guys, you realize that, right? Okay, but you guys, everybody knows, right? The bottom line is you dysregulate hormones, you dysregulate a body.
Right.
Right. So, hormones, what's happening is they're moving from one area, they're being made in one area, they're targeting another, they're made in a gland, they're targeting a specific tissue where they're going to tell a cell to do a specific job. And so we really are in the world of cellular medicine when it comes to hormones. You dysregulate hormones, you dysregulate a whole body, right? Because now you're not just talking about a single area, a single organ. You're not necessarily talking about a single disease. You're talking about cells in a body that have receptors for these hormones. And thinking thyroid, I think every single cell in the body, with the exception of red cells, and maybe white cells, have receptors for thyroid hormone. So again, we're not talking about, could it make your stomach sick? Could it make your heart sick? We're talking about the fact that all cells have receptors for most of these hormones, right? Because they need those hormones in order to do their function, right?
Yeah.
All right, slide number 3. Okay, so then let's talk about, and the couple things. Let me just say, we'll go over symptoms. We'll go over what labs mean.
Yeah.
And we'll go over the possible use of a detoxification strategy and who that's useful for. And then we'll switch gears. We spoke in our last webinar about gut function, and we promised to show a couple of labs this time around. And then we'll switch over so that you can ask any questions that you'd like. And our goal is about 30 minutes. That way you can get back to whatever you're doing. So just setting the scene over here for thyroid. All right, thyroid is a butterfly-shaped gland. It's right over here. Here's something that's interesting. I don't know if you had thought about this, but I'll throw it out there. Humans and mammals are obviously different than reptiles and amphibians. Okay, now that sounds like an obvious statement, but the real question is, what's the difference? So aside from like what we look like, and the key difference, or at least one of the key differences, is temperature regulation and body temperature control. Meaning anybody that lives in a cold place and goes by a lake, if there are turtles in that lake, right, it's going to come up onto the rocks and sun. Amphibians, reptiles, they can't regulate their temperature. Instead, their body temperature is the ambient temperature. If it's cold outside, they're cold. They have to seek heat. If it's hot outside, they're hot. They have to seek shade. Okay, for humans, because we have a thyroid, that's not the case. Instead, we should regulate to 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay, a healthy individual is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are already scratching your head with something like, hey, listen, I'm not usually 98.6. For a lot of people with thyroid, they'll say something like, I'm usually like 98.4, I'm 98.2, sometimes I fit into 97. That is the indication, right? What you're looking at is a thyroid, or the gland, that is critical at maintaining body temperature, and it can't regulate properly. So the question is, what does it do in order to accomplish a 98.6? And the answer is, it speeds up when things are cold and it slows down when things are hot. So it is controlling through metabolism body temperature. Okay, so it's the reason as we go through some of these symptoms, you're going to see some of the hallmarks when it comes to thyroid have to do with body temperature regulation. And if you're not sure if you have thyroid dysregulation, routinely taking your body temperature for a handful of days in a row will normally ask for a body temperature journal, waking up in the morning, taking body temperature, continuing every 3 hours throughout the day for 3 days. If what you notice is you rarely regulate to a 98.6, then suspect that something might be going on. The caveat is first thing in the morning and late at night, we're typically a little bit colder, so humans can move down to about a 98.4, but you should always be about 0.2 away from a 98.6. Yeah.
That speaks a lot to the systemic effect of thyroid. If you can imagine, if the thyroid is going to heat you up, it will send a signal to every cell that it can't. So you are heating up via single cells, heating up, increasing their metabolism because the thyroid has released a hormone that attaches to that and says, hey, we need you to speed up. So if you can think about how many cells in the body would need to actually speed up their metabolism to produce the warmth to keep you stable, is pretty much what's happening. And you could imagine, like Amy just said, all the cells, almost all of them have cells for receptors for thyroid.
Yeah. And so then just talking symptoms, so we know already from that conversation, right, that what the thyroid's going to do in order to control body temperature is it's going to control metabolism. All right. So because the end result is a 98.6, there is no surprise that folks that have thyroid dysregulation, typically slow thyroid dysregulation is going to make people feel cold, and too much thyroid function is going to make people feel hot or have hot flashes. One thing to know is a lot of times with a sluggish thyroid, people have both hot flashes and they feel cold. I can almost see the number of you that were out there that were like, wait a second, I've got both. All right, so here's the thing. When you don't have enough thyroid hormone, the area that can't get enough thyroid hormone is the area that's cold. The smallest vessels and the ones that are the farthest away from the heart, hands and feet, right? So there's no surprise when thyroid hormone levels are not quite high enough, hands and feet can get extra cold. If you're sleeping with socks on every night because you're that cold, if your hands routinely feel cold, if you have cold intolerance, so you go into the grocery store and the freezer section and you're just really uncomfortable, if throughout the summer you're generally wearing a sweatshirt, again, I can almost feel the group of you guys going, that's me sometimes. Okay, so then suspect on that day or during those periods of time, you may not have as much thyroid hormone as well. So what's happening is you've got the body temperature. If this is like a 98.6 right here, I don't know how to get myself into the screen, but you guys have to imagine. So it keeps sliding down because the thyroid cannot control the 98.6. So it keeps sliding. And once it gets to a point where a body recognizes the level is too low, so typically like a 98.2, a 98 or into the 97s, then commonly the thyroid will overreact and go way above 98.6 and people will have a hot flash. So commonly during sleep, because we're coldest when we sleep at night, people will wake up with a hot flash. Thyroid is not the exclusive cause of hot flashes. Estrogen and progesterone play a major role in that area as well. It doesn't change the fact that be aware if you oftentimes wake up with hot flashes, but you do not have a reproductive hormone dysregulation, consider it may be thyroid. And then going back to the fact that, your point, the thyroid is making energy in all the cells in order to increase body temperature or decrease it. And so then if you don't have enough thyroid hormone, you're going to notice that you don't have enough energy. So here's my question. If you don't have enough energy in the gut, what does it feel like? Right? And the answer is constipation, bloating and constipation.
Fullness,
yeah. So for a lot of people that we see with MTHFR, they routinely suffer with extended bouts of constipation and bloating, right? Because the digestive tract doesn't really have enough energy to support the motility. What does it feel like in a brain?
Poor focus, poor sleep, irritability.
Yeah, and just like foggy. People will actually say, right, they just feel so foggy.
Brain fog, yeah.
And it feels like your brain is slow. So now as we're talking about the fact that thyroid is energy, and you really think about the fact that thyroid is energy, what happens is that you generally feel slow, right? So your gut feels slow, your brain feels slow, your metabolism can be slow. And so it's not uncommon to have weight gain or to have a really hard time losing weight.
Yeah.
Your energy level is low. And so fatigue and just general malaise and lethargy become really, really common. So now going again through like the combination of symptoms, it's not that everybody has body temperature dysregulation, but if you do have cold hands, cold feet, definitely be thinking along these lines.
Could be a sign.
Poor sleep is commonly indicative of thyroid, or lots of wake ups, to say it differently. We talked about the brain side of things. So you just want to think through things, but you're like, oh, I can't remember that word. What is that word? It's on the tip of my tongue. And so it's just like that slow brain, and it feels like that. It feels like you're just working on slow speed.
And you know it too.
You know
feel it.
Yeah,
you just, it's horrible.
Okay. So then if those are the signs of thyroid.
Alrighty.
Let's see.
Then next.
Okay. Let's talk about labs and in range versus optimized. So
big difference too.
Yeah, and so a couple of things. Thing number one, thyroid function changes routinely. For me, I'm not a fan of a single lab value when it comes to thyroid giving a whole picture. And
Correct.
On our side, if we're going to treat for thyroid, we'll always insist on 2, and if there's still confusion, sometimes 3 labs before starting thyroid support. And the reason is if you go on thyroid medication or even sometimes with supplements, it's hard to get back off of them. Your body accommodates. So you just want to be certain. And remember, I mean, if you're in a hot place, you're going to try and cool down. And so you might have slower, thyroid function. If you're in a cold place, you might see faster thyroid function. And so if you haven't eaten for the day, your body's going to slow down metabolism. It's going to slow down thyroid. So thing number one with labs, we like the idea of doing a handful of labs, even though you're measuring the same thing, but you just really want to be certain and kind of take the average as far as thyroid function. Okay, thing number 2, I don't even know how many people we have seen that come in swearing that they do not have thyroid problems because they have their labs and their labs are within range.
Correct.
Okay, so that's our slide, right? Our slide is what is in range versus what is optimized. Okay, so here's the example I normally give people. So I consider myself to be an average woman, right? You consider yourself to be an average man.
Okay.
Yes, no? Okay. I still consider myself to be an average woman, regardless. Okay. We'll just use me. We're just going to use me as the example here. Okay. I don't know how many other women are out there, but I imagine that you're pretty average as well as far as the general size and shape of women. So whatever that would look like, the average woman is probably on the low side, 4'8", on the high side, 6. So we take kind of the average in between. The average weight on the low side, maybe about 110, on the high side, maybe about 250. So again, we kind of take the middle of that. Average hair color, average eye color, we know what averages look like. And so the question is then what I should be able to do is find any other average woman and trade stuff. I should trade shoes and we'd be the same size. I could trade clothes, I could trade glasses, I could trade anything because average to average, we're the same. Mm-hmm. Except you realize, obviously, that's not true. There's a very, very decided difference between being in range or being within an average versus being optimal. So I happen to wear a size 6 shoe. That's it. I could maybe squeeze into 5.5 for an hour. I can walk for sure in a 6.5, but that's it. That's my. So the thing when it comes to thyroid labs, even if you are in range, so you're in the average, that does not mean it's a good number for you. And if an average shoe size for women is 5.5 to 11, even though I can make a slight adjustment, a half size either way, I can't go any farther than that. I can't wear a size 8, right? I really can't wear a size 8. And so again, my point is, if we take a look now and we think T4 levels. Yeah. So on a lab, labs flag below a 4.5 and I think above a 10.5. Right around there. Okay, so let's just use that as our same. And
different labs will have
different ranges.
Minimal differences in the ranges. So.
But let's just talk. So if that's true, and now let's orient it back to shoes. So 4.5 to 10.5. Again, if somebody's wearing a 4.5 and they are on this webinar right now, I'm pretty certain that you are realizing as well, you cannot wear a 10.5, even though those are 2 sides of a T4 spectrum or a thyroid hormone spectrum. And likewise, if you're the person that's watching this as a 10.5, I am certain you can't get down into a 4.5. So my point is, just because you're in range or you're in an average doesn't mean you are optimized. And if you don't have your ideal number, then you can commonly have thyroid dysregulation or symptoms of a thyroid that's not functioning well. So ideally, you want to look at your clinical picture to be your indicator rather than just the lab values.
That's something that I love that we do here. That's one of the reasons I fell in love with this place, is being able to optimize. And we saw it with myself, several hormones when we discovered I was MTHFR positive, double C copy. There were a few hormones that I was in range with.
Yeah.
And it goes back to the philosophy of treat the patient, not the number. And Amy asked me, she goes, okay, great. So you're in range, but how do you feel? I said, no, I feel horrible. So she goes, okay, so we need to optimize it. So
Yeah.
I love that we do that.
Yeah. The concept is called subclinical. So, and the diagnosis when it comes to thyroid is called, if it's a slow thyroid or it's called subclinical hypothyroidism. And not only is it a real thing, but it is a fairly common thing. So subclinical hypothyroidism refers to the fact that somebody is very definitely dysregulated as far as thyroid functions. They need support, whether it's a medication or their supplement, but they need support. In spite of the fact that they are very definitely symptomatic for thyroid dysregulation and require support, their labs are normal. So again, subclinical hypothyroidism or subclinical hypotestosterone, hyperestrogen, hypoprogesterone, that concept is very, very common, where people again fit into an average, but because that number is not their ideal number, they're symptomatic, and so treatment is usually the next step. We talked, you and I, about whether we wanted to go through all the thyroid labs over here and really talk about what T4 means, how it converts into T3, how cells can block T3 with reverse T3, T3 uptake. And then we realized, I don't think we go down the road at this point of thyroid labs. I think instead, at least for this 8-part series, we kind of stay true to our initial mission, which is general education.
Yeah.
And so here's our message. It's not, can you interpret your own labs? Although we can always do classes after this and really dig down into the science and the interpretation of things. But the real goal right now is, if you are somebody with MTHFR, then again, you're a poor detoxifier. And if you are a poor detoxifier that has come in contact with toxins, which most people have, then it would not be unusual if you have some hormone dysregulations. If one of those hormone dysregulations is thyroid related, then know from the conversation today the kind of symptoms that you're looking for and what to do when you find that you're in range, right? To try and figure out, do you still need treatment? The goal is just to understand it would not be unusual. It doesn't mean that you have thyroid dysregulation, but it means it wouldn't be unusual. And so be on the lookout and use these classes just to kind of identify what may or may not be happening. All right. All right, let's see our next slide.
Okay.
Okay, detox. So detox is really a matter of preference, a matter of clinical preference, depending on who's seeing you, a matter of your own preference. I'll tell you my story of how I started using detox here in the practice. This is a while ago. Let me think about it. It's probably about 6 or 7 years ago. I was at an A4M meeting, so a functional academy meeting, and there were a group of discussions. So we were going through on just general functional health, and on the schedule around 11:30, somebody was speaking on detox. And I had already decided detox was kind of quasi-medicine, wasn't really sure that it could do anything. And I had calls that I had to make from my office. So I realized I was going to leave at 11:30 for a long lunch to make a bunch of calls and avoid the detox conversation, the lecture, because it felt to me like it wasn't real science. Right. And for me, my science background, I'm pretty black and white, either prove that it works, or for me, I'm not ready to move down that road. So the physician that was sitting next to me had asked, have you seen this guy speak before? And I hadn't. And he said, you're going to love this conversation. So I actually told him, I'm planning to leave. And his point was like, no, you got to see this guy, because he was able to kind of craft steps for a phase 1, phase 2 liver detox and get a lot of people healthy. And here's the thing, I would tell you his name, I just don't recall it. So if anybody else was at that A4M meeting and recalls, tell me, and I'll let everybody know. Here's the long and short. This is kind of interesting. He had a group of people, and he divided them into a control group and a group that he fed McMuffins in the morning. And then he ran blood and he looked for inflammatory markers. So he looked for interleukin 6, interleukin 8, and tumor necrosis factor. And so he watched inflammation, and alarmingly, inflammation went up well before 30 minutes. So he had the control group he tests. He doesn't feed them anything toxic. not to say that McMuffins are toxic. Anybody, please don't write letters. They're not toxic, but just to say they are inflammatory. So the control group didn't eat, and the group that he looked at these inflammatory markers and found the elevations did. Okay, so that did a couple of things. Number one, it clarified how fast the inflammatory cytokines can turn on.
Oh, yeah.
And then he mapped out a way to reduce them. And so reducing inflammatory cytokines comes down to controlling phase 1 and phase 2 of the liver. Here's the thing. Phase 2 liver detoxification includes the process of methylation, right? So we know that folks with MTHFR are poor detoxifiers because they're poor methylators, and because methylation is a critical component to the second part of liver detoxification. So that means if you have MTHFR and you're coming in contact with any kind of toxins, chlorine in water, parabens in creams,
Constant contact.
Yeah, your constant contact, pesticides. So then you're accumulating them, and then the question is whether you do a detox. So for us, we're fans of a detox, provided that you are not kind of spinning out with a medical situation that hasn't been addressed or hasn't been corrected. So I'll give you an example. I mean, you don't want to be an untreated diabetic with a fasting blood sugar of 300 and then throw stress onto your body like a detox, right? You don't want to have enormous nutritional depletions. We just saw somebody, her B12 she was like 100 and
120.
She was like it was like the lowest we'd ever seen, right? I really, we
ran it again
twice, right, to make sure. So
Yeah.
the thing is, like, for that kind of person, right, again, somebody that medically is not in a safe place, don't detoxify. Do not put that pressure on a body. Okay, so just have that caution. And at the same time, if you generally feel MTHFR-ish, and remember, it's really the combination of a little bit of thyroid dysregulation, estrogen progesterone dysregulation, oftentimes blood sugar dysregulation, but medically you're in a safe place, then on our side, in order to remove toxins, reduce inflammation, and kind of reset things, I'm a fan. And so between adding a bunch of methyl groups, so between putting things in or getting toxins out, when it comes to MTHFR, typically we'll start by getting things out. That's usually our preference. And we'll do it through a detox. And even though I would tell you initially, I thought this whole thing was kind of quasi-medicine, like how real could a detox be? We've tested it too many times to count. So we'll normally identify toxins. We'll look for polychlorinated biphenyls. We'll look for all kinds of pesticides and organophosphate pesticides. We'll look for plastics. We'll look for styrene and styrofoam. We'll look for parabens, phthalates,
MTBE.
and then MTBE. And then we'll detox when somebody comes here into clinic, and we'll remeasure them to ensure the levels have either reduced or been eliminated. So instead of the approach that I took maybe 5-6 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that, I would tell you, for me, when it comes to MTHFR, I like it. Be careful with detoxes. I know the picture looks like oranges and things, but that's
not a detox. No, that
don't
looks good.
Don't do radical things to your body. MTHFR bodies are especially unhappy with that. I'm not a fan of juice cleanses. I'm not a fan of really restricting your diet. We use the P5.0 detox over here. It's the one that I stick with because the one that I know will reduce inflammation when we test. So when I say detox, please don't go out there and do something very restrictive. Oftentimes you'll just make yourself sick or have a rebound afterwards when it comes to inflammation. So again, if you would like my recommendation, I would tell you I use routinely and like the P5.0 detox. If you have one that you like, you're welcome to tell us, and we'll kind of research it. The mark of a detox is, can it address phase 1 and phase 2 detoxification issues? And if it can, then it's a good detox. Yeah. Okay.
If anybody remembers the name of the doctor who gave that let them know to rerun that test and put me in the McMuffin group.
But plus, I'd love to be able to just give him credit and even tell him, hey, look, after all these years, I still use a detox protocol because you'd established how beneficial it is, and it can be. So the reason that we're talking about it with thyroid, remember, just going back to the initial concept over here, glands like a thyroid, so tissues in the body that are most susceptible to building toxins, becoming damaged by toxins, Those are glands. Glands are like at the top of the list for absorbing and becoming damaged by toxins. So thyroid is front and center in this whole thing. And for that reason, the question is, could you reduce the toxic burden? And if you do, could you improve the function of those glands? And oftentimes what we find in MTHFR is that you can. Now, let me also be clear. A lot of people are on thyroid medication. Okay? We are not talking about stopping thyroid medication. Okay? We are not talking about detox being an alternative to thyroid medication. So again, don't write a bunch of letters of you don't. Okay? Instead, there's different people, different needs. And so the question is, if you're suffering with dysregulating thyroid, what can you do? What do you want to do? Detox may be something that you put in your arsenal. It means everybody has specific needs. Everybody is their own unique person. Try to be careful managing your own health. It's not that you're not well read enough. It's not that you're not intelligent enough. It's that there is an advantage oftentimes in going to somebody that's treated a lot of MTHFR because they know what's going to work. They know what's going to backfire, and they can prevent things that are going to push you even further into this whole thing, right? So again, just as a caution, again, I'm not advocating detox. I'm not saying that you should or that you shouldn't. I'm not saying that detox is an alternative to medicine. Instead, what I'm saying is thyroid dysregulation is complex because a primary thyroid issue is there's something wrong with the gland. A secondary thyroid issue, which is what's most common in MTHFR, is the thyroid isn't damaged. The thyroid isn't broken. It can't function properly because of any number of things, in this case, toxic buildup. And so when that happens, just be gentle and careful. You don't want to overly detoxify and poison yourself with the toxins that are inside that got you sick to begin with. Yeah. You don't want to under detoxify because then you can never remove the toxins. And again, you don't want to start detoxification if you're in kind of a precipice where your health is just perched and in a bad place. So, okay.
Alrighty. And as promised,
yeah,
from last time, we just didn't have enough time just to go over very briefly what we look at, going back to gut health and the food sensitivity. So just a few key markers that we look at in determining levels of inflammation, and just so you can kind of see what we see on our side that helps to evaluate, create a better plan, for you, and a personalized one at that. So let me just come back out here and give me one moment while I share the new screen.
All right, and this is the food sensitivity test that we use over here. It comes as a finger prick or it comes with blood. So if you guys make it down here, we test with blood. But if you're not here, then we normally send it out as a finger stick. So just know you can always reach out to our office and we can always get that over to you. What you're looking at, can we go to the top for a sec?
Yes.
So you're looking at the individual categories. And so at the very top left, meat and poultry. And so you can see how they're all broken out. Anything that's marked in red is flagging. What you're looking at is the immune system and counting antibodies. And so the takeaway of this, first of all, there is no good food, bad food. There's no healthy food, unhealthy food. There's food that makes inflammation and food that does not in that individual. Okay. So your goal is to find foods that do not crank up your antibodies, right? Because those antibodies are then causing a lot of stress and strain on the immune system. So the second page is just taking the first page and organizing it into a way where what are the very worst foods and what are the very best foods. And so it gives you kind of a way of what foods to focus on. And the couple things that I like about this test, one, the accuracy, the fact that it really doesn't have false positives, false negatives, which is inherent to a lot of these tests. But secondly, if you go back up to the first page for a sec, there are so many foods over here at 184. And if you scroll down just a little bit, let me see, somewhere
ranges?
here, no, I'm looking for, go up just a little bit. I'm looking for supplements. Hang on. Oh, herbs, spices, and flavorings. There we are. So at the bottom on the right. And the reason is lots of people are taking a lot of supplements. And if those supplements, for example, lots of people are taking turmeric. Lots of people might be taking peppermint or licorice root in their adrenal supplements. So I like that we have a way to not just determine best foods, but also if there's a supplement that you're taking, you think it's healthy, but it has an ingredient that's keeping you inflamed.
All the time.
All right.
All righty.
We have 2.5 minutes. Okay, let's see. We go over to the large intestine test.
Yes.
Again, just circling back to what we talked about the other day. Thanks. Okay, so we were talking, how do you know if you've got a healthy gut? The top, so you should not have a high amount of fecal fat spilling. No, you were there. You shouldn't have a lot of fat spilling out into your intestines. So you can see for this individual, first of all, pancreatic enzymes, or is the pancreas making enough digestive enzyme to break down food? And this individual doesn't have enough, so they have a lot of food that's making its way into the small intestine that can cause inflammation. They look pretty good on fecal fat. So as far as does the lining and the gut absorb fats well? So just looking at the general absorption of the gut, that looks pretty good. You can see below inflammation and the immune system. So calprotectin, this individual is positive for irritable bowel syndrome or irritable bowel disease, right? And that becomes really important for us to know. They also have white cells, eosinophils, that are infiltrating to their gut. And they have, to a lesser extent, IgA or food sensitivities inside the gut. So we know with this person, from a treatment standpoint, we really are looking at irritable bowel as far as a condition. So it has to be treated from that vantage point. And again, those eosinophils. And then I think we could just scroll. I know it's hard to do it like this, but I think we scroll down to the infection page. We can go to the microflora, but again, what we're trying to do is just be mindful of time. So let me show you. Here's an interesting thing about the gut. Usually, if there's an area in your body and it's sick, like with an infection, you know it because you feel it. You feel pain and discomfort. There are two areas that routinely kind of fall through the cracks: the oral cavity and the gut. So that's to say, people can have infections that are fairly sizable for long periods of time, somewhere in the oral cavity, so in the mouth, or in the intestines, and not even know it, not feel sick, not know they've got a problem. And so one of the reasons for us to look at this part of things is just to kind of get a sense. So you can see at the bottom, Candida, right, as a 3+, listed as a PP or potentially pathogenic. Klebsiella pneumonia right above it as a 4+. So here's what this person looks like, right? Belly issues, gas, bloating, sometimes constipation, sometimes diarrhea. Klebsiella pneumonia as a 4+ or very, very large colony is in the intestines. That was our alarm. And here's what Klebsiella pneumonia does, true to its name. When the immune system is taxed, it goes and attacks the lungs and actually causes, well, its goal is to create pneumonia. And on the way, whether it's a cough or bronchitis, so for a lot of people, they've had for years kind of gut-related issue, and they'll describe the fact that they're really susceptible to lung stuff, and they get bronchitis routinely. Klebsiella pneumonia could be the thing. So the reason to show you this is just to say, we spoke last time around about gut health, the fact that the liver, when it can't properly methylate, winds up throwing unpackaged toxins into the intestines, and that can lead to infections because it destroys the microflora, the healthy microflora, and that's how bad guys can move in. So that kind of gives you an idea of some of the tests. And then I think we move to questions.
Questions?
Okay, let's see. They're down here somewhere. Oh, do we have to stop share? I think we do.
Let's see.
Hang on, we'll get off. Oh, we don't have to stop share. How do we do this? It's on the bottom of the screen. Okay, so anybody that has questions, you're welcome to go ahead and ask them now. Hang on, we're looking for our first. Okay, so the question is the food sensitivity test. How often do we run it, and where do you find it? As far as the gut, the general consensus is that the lining of the gut is replaced every 190 days. And so the thing is, you would want to run a new food sensitivity test, at least that frequently. We normally run it every 3 months, and the reason is you can heal a gut pretty fast. So aside from replacing the lining, if you eliminate those foods, and there are certain things that we normally use. We'll normally use the BiomeIQ digestive enzymes. as like a starting point. We'll normally use the vitamin D from BiomeIQ and sometimes an omega. A lot of times I like EPA, but in combination with DHA. And so commonly by the end of 3 months, the food sensitivities at that point have resolved. And so when we're actively trying to treat somebody, we oftentimes will test every 3 months, again, because once you no longer have that food sensitivity, it's beneficial to add that food back in. As far as where you can get it, it's on the MTHFR store, and it comes as a finger stick. Okay, that was the next. Okay, hi. I just saw the next question that came up. You guys, you got it. The question was, how do you test for it? It comes as a package where there actually is a tiny
Fingerprint, lancet.
Lancet. Thanks very much. And so it's a little tiny amount of blood, and then it takes about 2 weeks to get the labs back. You get the full list of your foods. We always like a call so that we can explain exactly what's going on and what to do next, how to eliminate foods, when to start putting them back on. Anything else to say about that? It's a finger prick test. I don't know what to say.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a question talking about thyroid. How do you know what thyroid medication to take? I can't seem to find a thyroid medication that works well for me. Okay, here's what I want to say. What I want to say is clinically, the person that is treating you knows the medication that you're going to do well with and knows the perfect dose. Unfortunately, what I have to say is thyroid can be a bit of a hit or miss. Okay. Different people respond better to different versions of T3 or T4 and using them as monotherapies or combining them together. Some people really do better on a porcine medication like Armour. Some people really do better on a T3, T4 like Thyroid. Some people really do better on just a T4. One of my favorites, I like Tyrosint. So as far as a T4, the claim to fame of the company that makes that material is no fillers, no additives, no preservatives. And when it comes to the world of T4 specifically, so there aren't really any other options that are clean. So if you have MTHFR and you're taking a T4 like levothyroxine, which is the generic, or Synthroid, and you find that you just don't feel well, you may want to talk to your practitioner and see to make a change over at the same dose to Tyrosint and get a sense if you feel any better. T3 is an interesting material. So T4 is made by the thyroid. It gets converted at the cell level, so in the peripheral tissue when the cells need it. So the cells say, hey, I need more energy. They get T4, they convert it into T3, right? That's how that process works. And then if there's too much T3 or they don't want to have that activity, then they'll start to bind those receptors competitively with reverse T3. But the long and short is finding your perfect mix. Oftentimes take somebody that has a lot of skill in that area and a little bit of patience, because there may actually be some back and forth when it comes to that. And using labs as a guide, but not as your only indicator, right? So it really is matching the clinical symptoms along with the lab values. Yeah. And know that thyroid function can change from hour to hour, from day to day, especially depending on what you have eaten or what you haven't eaten, right? Metabolism's slowing down when people are not eating, or metabolism's changing if people are not getting enough sleep, or if you have like a cold or a flu. Thyroid dysregulation is really, really common. So just know a single lab test is not your measure. Instead, a couple of labs looking at numbers and kind of plotting out a trend. And I like the temperature journal, right? You'll know when thyroid function has regulated. One, because you won't have cold hands, cold feet. You won't have the same difficulty with focus, concentration, and remembering things. You won't have the malaise and low energy. You won't be into this permanent weight gain, difficult weight loss situation. There likely won't be as many wake ups at night. You won't have the cold intolerance. We didn't talk about anxiety and irritability. I don't know how I missed that, but anxiety is very, 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 very common in people that have thyroid dysregulation. So very commonly, people that have thyroid dysregulation develop high anxiety. If you are an individual that has really no history of anxiety, and then over time you've noticed it started and has been getting worse, very definitely consider looking at your thyroid as far as a causative. causative factor. And I think that's everything. Anything on your side?
I think we said it all for now. Let us know what you think. Let us know what you want to know. Again, we don't have these PowerPoints stored. We actually make these with the questions that we have that come in, the most recent questions, the most recent case studies that we have. So we really do try to keep this as true to a conversation as we can. So the more we know what you want to know, we will change things as much as we have to really cater to you guys.
And again, our goal is education, period. And what we're trying to do is first stop some of the misinformation that's out there about MTHFR.
So much.
And then secondly, kind of just put out some what we consider to be good, useful, scientific information. I hate that a lot of folks are out there with MTHFR feeling like they're the only ones, feeling so sick and not really having somebody that would say or that can describe, listen, you've got MTHFR, it's okay. I understand that's exactly how you feel. That's how a lot of other people feel with MTHFR. It's not unusual. So know from this conversation, we're here to support you. We're here to offer as much education as we can. And with that, we look forward to the next call. I think if we're planning for Monday, I don't know what the next one is.
I'm not sure.
We should look at the schedule. That happened to us last time too. All right, we'll get better at looking at the schedule. And that way we can actually say at the end. And the next one is, but in the interim, the office will do two things. They'll put the recording up. We always put the recording link in the MTHFR Facebook group. You don't have to be part of that group, by the way, to be part of these webinars. So we'll do that. And we'll make sure that as well, they list over there the next call that's coming up so that you'll know the topic.
It's coming though.
I think it might be reproductive hormones.
I think it might be too.
All right. Well, we'll see you guys on Monday.
All
Take
right.
care.
Bye, guys.
Bye.